you've said defunding UNRWA at this point is likely to be breach of the Genocide Convention in its own right unless states provide direct aid to alleviate the humanitarian crisis. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, I mean, I'd like to add to that defunding UNRWA at this point is inhumane and it's immoral. I think, in my view, that it's potentially a criminal act, collective punishment potentially, and I say collective punishment potentially because the action taken punishes the Palestinian people as a whole in Gaza. Now, collective punishment is an unusual criminal offence in international humanitarian law in that the Rome Statute of the ICC doesn't consider it a prosecutable offence, but the offences within it are, so that's really important. And even in the United Kingdom, we don't have universal jurisdiction for collective punishment, but again, we have jurisdiction for the offences within it. So collective punishment is, it's a very clear example of collective punishment. But it also could potentially be a primary act of genocide in one way, or at least complicity in genocide. And I say that in this way. If you are a state and you look at the court that you are a party to, by the way, because you are, like the United Kingdom is, party to the United Nations Charter and thereby the ICJ, International Court of Justice Statute. If you're a state and you're looking at the highest court in the world and it makes a provisional measure order where it states that the rights of the Palestinians need to be protected in international law, that in its own right should trigger your own state obligations of the Genocide Act, because if you're a part of the Genocide Act, you're meant to protect people from genocide. But you're then taking an action which could speed up, accelerate death and suffering on the ground, in concert with the primary perpetrator of those alleged genocidal acts. I can't see how that in any way would remove secondary party or even potentially primary party liability from those states, having been put on notice, not put on notice by you, Dania, as a legal officer of ICJP, or by me as some lawyer in London who happens to have this as their specialist area, right? But put on notice by an independent court, which included an Israeli judge, by the way, who didn't disagree with every provisional measure, as we've seen, right? And so you've got to wonder what's going through the minds of the decision makers. And it occurred to me, right, that one of the things that might be going through the decision makers' mind is, for me, what the list of countries that have defunded UNRWA is a list of potential suspects to investigate in war crimes, because are they actually objecting to UNRWA, or are they actually trying to tell the International Court of Justice and the United Nations there are consequences for your actions, including funding, because we are significant donors to the rules-based international system that we helped create, and we own it. And if you don't play by our rules, then we'll defund it. But even worse than that, is it because they're worried about being held complicit in the actions that the ICJ is already investigating? Now, if I was an intervening state or even South Africa, I would give serious thought to triggering Article 63 of the International Court of Justice Statute, which allows the registrar of the ICJ to put on notice other states that need to become parties to the ICJ proceedings, because there is in some way a need to make the orders of the ICJ binding on them. And I would say that I would be advising states that are looking at intervening to consider making the United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, Germany, the other countries that are defunding UNRWA parties to those proceedings for defunding, and lots of people have said, we shouldn't. Why should we pay money for it? It's you can't have it both ways, right? Why should the United Kingdom? Why should the United States pay money to UNRWA? You can't create an international accountability structure that you agree is so important to do because 6 million Jews died in World War II, and we needed to create a system to prevent that from happening again. And then when it kind of points its finger at you, you decide that you don't want to play that game. And what's really interesting is that the countries that are defunding UNRWA is only a small number of countries, and it does give an opportunity for other countries to step up and say, okay, you're not going to fund it and we're going to fund it. But there's also something else which is really concerning me about this, and that's that you have these, the timing is almost ridiculous. You have the ICJ ruling, and then you have Israel going, oh, guess what? We just suddenly discovered that 12 people that were part of UNRWA are terrorists. Even taking that allegation at its highest, even if that's true, which I don't know if it is true, and I haven't seen the evidence to say it is. I have skepticism about that allegation, frankly. But even if it is true, and let's take it at its highest, how does that justify defunding the entire of the UNRWA operation, which operates not just in Palestine, but also in other states around the region that protect Palestinian refugees? That doesn't make sense in its own right. And if you're going to talk about credibly taking a step to defund an organization or a state, you're talking about an allegation made by a country that is plausibly involved in genocidal acts, an allegation made by that state which funnily enough happens to protect its ambition, compared to an allegation made by an independent court with judges across 15 different countries who have decided that there is plausible genocide, but you don't see the same action in the slightest, not even a step towards defunding or sanctioning or calling Israel to account for that. Now, if you wanted to ask me whether I thought the defunding of UNRWA was genuine and credible, I'd say, well, let's point to this other side. If they had decided, frankly, to defund UNRWA and stop funding and sending weapons to the alleged perpetrator of genocide and war crimes, I might give it some credibility, and I might think, okay, maybe there's some reason for you doing this, but I don't accept that, particularly to do it before an investigation's been concluded. I mean, I saw a report today that I think it was Blinken saying we haven't looked at the evidence yet, we just listened to what Israel had to say. Well, that's just cynical and ridiculous. I'm really disappointed at these states for taking this step, really disappointed.